Okay, now that we've taken off the fuel tank, the air cleaner assembly, the governing linkage assembly, and the muffler, we can get to work on the cylinder head. So to do that, we're going to need again a 10mm socket, a 12mm socket, a 3/8 drive ratchet, an extension, and a 13/16 socket. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the spark plug cap. Comes off. I'm actually going to undo it from this plastic housing here so it doesn't get hung up earlier or later on, and we'll just let it sit there. Next, I'm going to take my 13/16 socket, place it gently on the spark plug. Once it's on the spark plug, it shouldn't take a lot of force. Okay. Now, I want to be very careful of this porcelain not to break it, and we also want to be careful of the ends, especially the one that goes inside the engine. We don't want to damage that at all, or else it won't work, obviously. Set that aside. Now, what we have to do next is we got a 10mm bolt here. We also have a 10mm bolt on the bottom that we're going to get to right now. And I'm actually going to use an extension just to give me a little bit of better body position mostly. That way my ratchet's not hitting the PTO shaft here. I'm just going to tilt the engine slightly so you can see this on camera. And we got this one here. Okay, once that's done, I can now take off the 4 10mm bolts holding on the cylinder head. I usually start with the bottom ones first, and the reason is if I take off the top ones first, the cylinder head's going to want to fall forward. But if I take the bottom ones off first, then it's just going to want to kind of hang in place, and that's just fine. Makes it a little bit easier trying to balance everything at the same time. So when you pull this off, there should be a cork gasket in here. If you don't have one, try and find one. If you do have one, try not to lose it. And now once we look inside here, we can see the rocker arms, the valve springs, and the push rods are underneath here. We're not worried about any of that right now. We're just worried about these 4 12mm bolts. Now we will need an extension to get to these ones down here, and the same rule applies. If I take the bottom ones off first, makes life a little bit easier. Now these should be fairly tight, so they might be a little bit tricky to undo. Okay, now once you get it to this point, it should slightly wiggle off. There's going to be a couple of lineup pins in there that are going to kind of keep it together and make sure that these are all the way loosened up. all the way loosened up. So there should be a couple of lineup pins in here. So we have a graphite gasket, just like on the exhaust. We have one lineup pin here and one stayed on the cylinder head. I'm going to take that and I'm going to put it right back here. I also have my push rods. These are going to want to fall out, so I'm just going to gently pull these out and set them aside. At this point, your cylinder head is removed, and once you pull the push rods out, there's not going to be any tension on the valves, so they might fall out, so be careful that you don't lose your valves. At this point, we can work on the cylinder head separately. So I'm going to set this aside, and you don't want to set it on the machine surface here. You want to set it kind of, on the back side, or preferably not here, but you want to set it down on the back here. Now I'm going to go ahead and replace my cylinder head bolts, that way I don't lose them. Again, I'm just going to go right into the lineup pin. If you don't have a graphite gasket, this is probably the most commonly lost gasket in the shop for some reason. I do have several of them laying in the spare parts box, and if you don't have one, once again, just grab one. So I'm just going to run these in by hand so I don't lose them. You don't have to run them all the way down. I do, just out of habit, but you don't have to. You can just hand tighten them about halfway or so. Now we are ready to take apart the actual cylinder head and see all the different parts in there. Once you get these run in, we're done with the cylinder head removal.